That's what imposter syndrome is. I'm comparing myself to everyone else and I suck. That's essentially what it is. So if we take that away and we just start to think in terms of, okay, you know what? Jess is better than me at this one thing. But wow, I'm going to really work really hard to be supportive of that. I'm going to share her content. I'm going to ask for her advice. I'm going to ask for her time and support. Now it's no longer a me against Jess thing. It's a me and Jess thing.
Welcome to Amplify with Jess Ekstrom, a show designed to help women get out of their head and into their zone of influence.
Last season, I mentioned the fable of the Chinese farmer who seemingly had some fortunate or unfortunate events happen to him and who kept responding, good luck, bad luck, who knows? Because he was wise enough to know that things aren't always what they seem. And when something that seems like bad luck happens, a door can open up into something new. Today's guest is Therese Gopaul-Robinson, keynote speaker and expert in healthcare credentialing and leadership development. And for Therese, her bad luck scenario happened on the day she decided it was time to ask for a raise.
You know, when you looked at things that, things like production and quality of work and hitting all the metrics and all that stuff, my team was killing it. We were like nailing it. And, I had spoken about promotions in the past. And so I knew that it was time. But I'll be honest with you, Jess, like getting to a place where I was comfortable enough to, actually ask for it took a lot of work on my part. But I just kind of kicked into what I know best, which is, sticking to the facts. And so that's what I did. I had the data, I had all the information. I put together this beautiful PowerPoint presentation, which I still have. I haven't been able to let go of it. And I'd had a meeting scheduled with my boss, our regular Monday morning one-on-one. And I thought, perfect opportunity.
Great.
I queued up my presentation. And just when I was about to, and I had sent a copy to my boss as well. So boss had the presentation. And just when I was about to start, HR joined the call. And
oh my gosh.
And then I was told, unfortunately, effective immediately, you're no longer with the organization. So, and my presentation was still on the screen as this was happening.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
How did you respond?
I was in shock. I was, my initial response was, it just wasn't registering. Like I couldn't, I don't know. It wasn't landing in my brain that it was actually happening. And, I would say initially shocked. Secondly, to be very honest, I wouldn't say I begged, but I immediately started asking about other opportunities within the organization because I was just so scared. It was terrifying. And this was the height of the pandemic, and this was the last place that I wanted to be was, out looking for a job. And, the next thing I did, which I was actually really proud of, was I negotiated my severance.
Good.
Yes. And that was a big one for me because I would have never done that. But, I did. And I was really proud of that. And it was a very collaborative experience. And, it was, they were downsizing the workforce, that sort of thing. So luckily it wasn't performance related. But yeah, that's what I did on the call. After the call, now that's a different story.
Yeah. You have to let yourself be human. And feel it.
Oh, and did I? Yes, I did. I cried a lot. Luckily, I had a lot of wine at home. So check and check. But, honestly, Jess, it was hard. It was really, really hard because, as I mentioned to you before, it took a lot for me to ask for something like that.
Yeah.
And if I'm being 100% honest, there was always a part of me that felt that it was never going to happen because I wasn't good enough to be in a higher level role than I was. And so although I mustered up that courage, deep down, if I'm being honest, deep down in my belly, I felt like, that's never going to happen. Like, there's no way, Therese, that you're going to actually be able to do something like that.
That, what's crazy to me, and that I'm just now kind of drawing this parallel, is we've had quite a few guests on this show whose stories begin from being laid off. And they are now like who they are today, some world-class speaker like you. And that is how their story began. So, but I think people unfortunately get laid off a lot or just have life's unexpected bumps. How did you go from that and those feelings of imposter syndrome to now I'm a speaker and companies and people hire me all over the world to help their teams?
Yeah. Now, Jess, I would love to tell you that I just had like this epiphany and I knew this was my calling and all those things, but that's really not the truth. Really, it happened for me just one afternoon. It was probably a month after. And
Mhm.
this was actually a month after me just, being on every single job search website you could think of and applying and applying and applying like a crazy lady. And it was just one Sunday, I was sitting down with my husband. We were having coffee because we try to do that every Sunday. That's like our only, hour in the week of us time. And, he looked at me and he just said, Therese, what are you doing? What is it that you want? And I said to him, well, I'm looking for a job and I'm trying to figure things out. And he said no. And he was like, I'm gonna call BS on that. That's what he always tells me. And he said, Therese, for as long as I've known you, you've talked about wanting to be a speaker, wanting to be a writer, wanting to tell your story, wanting to connect with people. And, you know, and before that, about a year before that, he needed a last minute speaker for an event that he was having at work. So he was like, hey, can you step in and do a motivational talk? So I did it. And he said, Therese, I'd never seen you speak before. And he said, I knew you were good, but I didn't know you were that good. And your talk to this day continues to be the one that people keep requesting over and over.
Wow.
And he said, Therese, you have something here that people need, and you have something inside of you. And, you're at a point now in your life where you need to decide, like, which way are you going, left or right? And that was really the beginning. That was the beginning of me being, I don't know. It's like, when you have these dreams, you feel that that's just all they are. It's just dreams, because things like that don't happen to me. It happens to everyone else. It happens to that person and that
Yeah.
person, not me. And that was the moment that I actually started to believe that there was a potential chance that it could be me too.
So I think you hit the nail on the head of like the first step to being a speaker or doing whatever you want to do is belief.
Yeah.
And that takes a long time sometimes. But then what happens after? So you're like, okay, this is something I want to do. What are the first steps? What do you start doing in order to now become the speaker that you are?
So the first thing I did, I started to reach out to organizations. And so I'd gotten this nugget from another speaker, and, he said, hey, just start looking at organizations that are having conferences and things like that. They're always looking for speakers. And so I actually reached out to, and I'll give them a shout out, Texas Medical Association. And I sent, that was like the 200th email I had sent, just trying to, like, I had no idea how to do a pitch or any of that stuff. I just reached out, and, they immediately responded and said, okay, well, do you have a video? No. Do you have a speaker sheet? Sure. Meanwhile, I'm Googling
how to make a speaker sheet.
Yeah. And they said, unfortunately, because of lack of experience, we won't book you this time, kind of call us back. And I said, okay, but here's what I want to do. I want you to keep my name, because there's going to be a point where you will have a speaker who cannot show up. If that happens, call me. You tell me when, you tell me where, you tell me what, and I will do it. I will pay for everything. And if you love me, great, we'll talk more. If it's terrible, no loss, I'll lose my number. And they said, okay. And literally, like, I think a month later, they called, like a week before their big conference. And they're like, can you talk about physician burnout? And it's on Tuesday at 4:00. And I said, sure.
Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
did it. And I got on their stage and I delivered a talk on physician burnout to a room of, I think it was almost like 150 physicians. And I was terrified and I had forgotten most of what I was what I was supposed to say, but I got through it. And what was amazing about that, Jess, was I never felt something like that before. Number
Mm-hmm.
one. Number two, when I got off the stage and I was leaving because I was the last speaker and I had driven to Austin that morning and was driving back and, I was heading out the door and the host said, hold on a minute. And I said, okay, what do you need? Whatever. And she's like, no, you see all those people lined up over there? They want to talk to you.
Hmm.
And an hour and a half, 2 hours later of just person after person after person coming up to me and, sharing just some incredible, like heart-wrenching, intimate stories about their struggles with burnout. It told me at that moment that this is where I belonged and this is what I needed to do. I get emotional every time I talk about it because, someone said to me that day, this is the first time I felt like somebody actually understood what I was going through. And I
Oh my
never heard someone
gosh.
speak like that before in my life. And so that was when I thought, okay, this is what I need to be doing. And that was kind of how it started. But
Best testimonial ever. I
yeah,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about you is, and I think this is common and true with a lot of speakers, is the thing that you speak on is like, from hearing your story, is the thing that you struggled with the most. Like you
Oh, yeah.
speak a lot on comparison and imposter syndrome. And you talk about in the beginning of your story when getting laid off, like those were things that you felt. How do you go from being the student of something that you're struggling with to then being the expert and speaking on it? Like, what was that journey like for you?
So for me, and so let me be very clear that I'm learning every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I actively have to work on every single day. So I always start with that. But for me, it just started with, okay, for to ask me to look in the mirror and say, you're capable and you're beautiful and all these things, I wasn't going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, what I did, because of just the way that my brain works, I thought, okay, I'm going to stick to the facts. So, what are the facts telling me in terms of either my performance or a specific situation? Because I can pick apart the facts. I could trust the facts. And so, I always start there with, okay, what are the facts telling me?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing really well? What can I improve? Okay, I can work with that because I feel more control because now I can kind of dissect and figure out what's next.
Oh my
So that's
gosh.
like number one.
I want to actually like hit on that for a second because I think
Sure.
a lot of speakers, and myself included, listening to the facts, like watching our own footage, reading audience reviews, looking at like what's actually working is something that's really tough because we just want to believe the narrative that we have in our head and want to believe. But I always say that in business, it's like way better to approach something as a scientist than it is in your own personal ego. Because if I'm there showing up as like, I want everyone to like me because I have my ego involved in this,
Oh, yeah.
not going to come out as good as if I am showing up as a scientist looking for the facts of what does this audience need? What do I know that I'm good at? And what can I provide? So I love that tip.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a big one, especially if you're like me, where your inner voice tends to always go to the negative
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
And then you just get caught up in that. So, I try to focus on the facts. The next thing that I would recommend is learn. Just really open yourself up and learn as much as you can about whatever it is in front of you. Learn as much as you can from the people around you. Seek out people so here's something that I started doing. Yes, I seek out people who are further along the journey than me, but I also intentionally seek out people who intimidate me,
Hmm.
or who I would have maybe, let's say, I might have envied in the past. I seek them out intentionally, and I try to connect with them because it really just it pushes me to kind of walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. Because, we hear that all the time, right? Hey, Jess, you're my sister, like women empowerment, all this other stuff, right? Which is great. But then, as soon as I hang up, I'm like, oh my gosh, did you see what she was wearing? Or, whoa, she's so
Which is
great.
the worst.
All those things. And so I intentionally push myself to walk the walk and seek out folks who are intimidating to me, or who I feel like in my past life, I would have thought, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. Like, okay, no, I can't be friends with her. And I'm being honest, I'm telling you truly what's happening in my brain. And
I love that.
And I try to do things intentionally to support them. So if you look at my LinkedIn, you will note that a lot of times I promote other women who are,
I did notice that. Yeah.
quote, competitors. And I do that intentionally because that is my way of being more genuine in terms of the relationships that I have with them. But it's also pushing me to get to a place of being okay with another person's success, and even in sometimes being okay with someone doing it better than me. And so that's a big one. That has been a big shift for me lately.
I'm not good at that one.
I'm trying really hard on that one. But it really pushes me to do some of those things that I otherwise would not have. And in turn, what happens is, we end up having a very authentic relationship between me and that person. They are, Jess, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Wow, you're actually genuine. Like, this is interesting because I've never experienced this before. You're actually supporting me and that sort of thing. And so what happens is just you end up having just this incredible community of people around you who just start to champion for you as well. And it just becomes an incredible thing. So in terms of me being a student to actually being the expert, it's me trying to every single day live in the space in terms of learning and growing to be comfortable enough in my own skin, flaws and all, to be genuinely supportive of someone else. Because really, in my opinion, that's what imposter syndrome is. I'm comparing myself to everyone else and I suck. That's essentially what it is. So if we take that away and we just start to think in terms of, okay, you know what? Jess is better than me at this one thing. But wow, I'm going to really work really hard to be supportive of that. I'm going to share her content. I'm going to ask for her advice. I'm going to ask for her time and support. Now it's no longer a me against Jess thing. It's a me and Jess thing. And that's the shift.
That is fascinating. So in a conversation that we were having earlier with someone about like Strengths Finder, mine was definitely like competition, which can be, there's two ends of the spectrum where it can be helpful and it can be harmful. And like finding that it's like not me against the rest, like you said, it's me and someone else, is like such an amazing shift that I think for the ultra competitor in me can really learn from. So when you get booked to speak, are they bringing you in for imposter syndrome, comparison? Like, what are some of the things that you share on stage? And can you give us a little tidbit for our audience?
Yeah. So all of what you just said. So my most recent talk that I did with a women's ERG was actually focused on stop doing so much. And so,
I need to listen to every single one of your talks.
Yeah. And again, listen, I'm not only the president, I'm also a member, but it's something that I actively have to work on. And so I talk a lot about, and my audiences tend to be primarily women, women in the workplace in some fashion. But, my most recent talk was about just that, just how do you stop doing so much? And really, the way that I look at that is, especially in the workplace, I look at it in three buckets. And so the first bucket is what we bring with us to the workplace. And what we bring with us is some of those societal, norms, right? You've got to be a homemaker. You've got to be a loving wife and mom, all those different things, right? What we bring with us is, again, the insecurities, the imposter syndrome, all that. So that's bucket one. So we bring that to work with us. And then it's also what we receive. That's the second bucket. So what we receive is, again, some of the societal expectations of us having it all, whatever that looks like, and looking fantastic while we do it. Right? That's what we're receiving. But we're also receiving a lot of very specific things that are unique challenges to us as women in the workplace, like the glass cliff, or all of these different things that are happening, right, where we, statistically speaking, women tend to be put in leadership roles when companies are struggling the most, versus their male counterparts who are put into leadership roles when things are like working like crazy and everything's
Yes, I've heard
fantastic,
this.
right? So we have those three buckets. We have the first one, which is what we bring, the second one, which is what we receive, and then the third one, now this is just this is my humble opinion on what's happening, but then the third one is what we project. And so when we're doing so much, we're projecting certain things, and we're projecting to our leaders that, hey, we have no boundaries, we'll always say yes, we have nothing, we don't have enough to do because we keep saying yes to things. What we project to our colleagues is there's a lack of trust and there's unhealthy competition because Therese has always got it. Jess, don't worry about it. I got it. And then what we are projecting to our team, the folks who report to us, is essentially unrealistic expectations. We tend to micromanage a lot, all of that. So that kind of all is in that bucket of the doing so much. And so how do we combat that? Well, number one, like I said, start to be okay with people doing it better than you. Oh, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Tough pill to swallow, but I'll try. Yeah.
But it really is. Because, really quick, 30 seconds or less, I have a really close friend who she sat as a chair for this nonprofit, and it was a volunteer position, organization for the last 7 years. And she's burned out, exhausted. She can't do certain things because of the time commitment for this role. And she quite frankly hates it. And we were sitting having breakfast one morning, group of us. And, I said, well, why is it that you won't leave this? And then after 30 minutes of round and round, she finally said, because what if the next person does it better than me?
Ooh.
And that really hit home for me, because I think that is the kind of the root of why we tend to do as much as we do as women, because we have this fear that someone else is going to do it better than us. And what does that say? Well, that says that we're not as valuable, we don't matter as much, and we don't belong as much. And so that's the first thing, is getting okay with people doing it better than you, giving yourself some credit. So looking to see, okay, what actually am I doing really well? What are some of the talents that I have? And what are some things that I can do to actually make this a better situation? And then saving room for the good yes. Because if you're saying yes and doing all the things, or like my best friend always tells me, Therese, you're always doing the most. If you're over here doing the most all the time, then it's not going to leave room for the good yes. The yes that you really want, that you don't think is going to happen if you're so busy kind of doing all these different things. So that's just kind of one of the things I like to talk about a lot, because I am 100% guilty of doing that. And even though I talk about this, I still struggle with it. And I have to, check myself sometimes and say, wait a minute, Therese, do you really need to, bake bread from fresh and get the laundry done and get your workout in and get on this call with Jess? And I mean, like, you pick two.
Yeah. Yeah. We are walking the same path. I literally was Googling how to make sourdough this morning. And then once it was like fermenting something or creating the starter, I was like, absolutely not. I will go to the bakery. But Therese, where can people book you to speak, and where can people find you to learn from you?
Yes. So you can actually visit my website. It's just theresegr.com, and that's TheresegR.com. And on there, you can find links to, do any kind of consultations or book me to speak. But then also just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on there every single day, and I share probably too much on there, and it's just my name, just Therese Gopaul-Robinson. But, if you're wanting to book me for anything or would love to chat more, those are the two places you can reach me.
Perfect. And I will say that she is one of my favorite follows on LinkedIn. So we'll be sure to put her website and her LinkedIn in the show notes. Therese, thank you so much for sharing your story, getting laid off on the same day that you thought you were going to get promoted. Gut punch, but I am so glad that it brought you here and brought you to me so we can talk about this amazing career that you made from it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jess. This has been great. And I'm really just so excited to get to sit down and chat with you.
Thanks, Therese. Thanks for listening to Amplify. If you are a fan of the show, show us some podcast love by giving us a rating and review. And give us a follow at Mic Drop Workshop and at Jess Ekstrom. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence, and I'm Jess Ekstrom, your host. Remember that you deserve the biggest stage, so let's find out how to get you there. I'll see you again soon.